Live from WWL Louisiana, this is an Elections on 4 special.
All right, you just heard from the 3 candidates, the top candidates for New Orleans mayor, making their case to you, the voter. And now the questions and conversations will continue. Welcome to our WWL Louisiana mayoral debate post show. I'm Mike McDaniel.
And I'm Devin Bartolotta. Thank you for joining us on WWL+. We're going to speak one-on-one with each of the candidates that you just heard from. We're also going to hear from members of local organizations for their impressions of the night.
Yeah, so a lot to get to. Thanks for being with us, as we always want to say. But the first candidate with us joining us in the post-debate special is State Senator Royce Duplessis, a candidate who initially ruled himself out of the race, but later changed his mind and is now one of the top contenders.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us after this. I want to hear, what are your thoughts on how you did? How did it go for you tonight?
Well, I felt like I was able to get my point across in 1 minute. As always, can be a challenge to try to express all of your thoughts when these very complex issues that have held our city back. But I feel like I connected with the people of New Orleans because I am the people of New Orleans. And, you know, it's not an act. It's really not a performance for me. This is what I truly believe. I've been in public service now for 20 years. I started as a chief of staff to a New Orleans city councilman back in 2006, post-Katrina New Orleans. I actually deferred law school to help rebuild my city. I have been a corporate trained lawyer, a problem solver my whole career. I worked as special counsel for Chief Justice Burnett Johnson at the Louisiana Supreme Court. I served on the New Orleans City Planning Commission, where I was the chairman for 2 years. That was all before my elected service, serving 7 years in the state legislature. So I believe deeply in this city, and I've chosen to use all that's been invested in me to give back to the city that's done so much for me. I love the people here. I love the city. I believe in all of its beauty. I see all of its warts, but I want to embrace it and be a part of making it a better city because I have the experience. I'm the most qualified, and I believe I'm the most qualified.
Can we talk about that a little?
Absolutely.
Can you take us back to what made you even want to get into politics? Like, take me through your path a little bit.
Yeah, well, I always thought I was going to go to law school and just make some money. I never saw myself being in elected office, but as I mentioned, in 2006, when I got this opportunity to work on a campaign, it kind of was unexpected. And I told my mom that I was going to defer law school to go and work for Councilman James Carter as his chief of staff. She didn't agree with that decision, but it ended up being a great decision, and I discovered something inside of me. I discovered a calling for public service, and I wanted to be a part of rebuilding my city. And that's never left me, even though there were times where I really wasn't chasing a political title. I just always wanted to put to the highest and best use my education, my experience, and my passion for service. So when a seat in the state legislature opened up, I ran, and we were successful. For the past 7 years, I've been working in a very hostile climate in Baton Rouge, working on behalf of the people of New Orleans, fighting for insurance reform, fighting for women's rights, women's reproductive rights, women's health care, fighting for criminal justice reform, trying to move our state in a positive direction. But the key that I want to emphasize that I think distinguishes me and why I'm the best qualified in this particular moment is that what we need is healing in the city of New Orleans. We've had a dysfunctional city council and mayor relationship. They have not been able to work collaboratively together. I've been able to work collaboratively with people I disagree with by putting people first always. It's never been about politics for me. It's always been about putting people first. So in addition to my professional experience, both as a lawyer and as a public servant, I have the temperament, I have the leadership skills, I'm ready. I have the vision and the plan to get it done.
When you think about the debate that just happened, your question that you asked to Councilmember Moreno, why that question, and do you think that has had really any impact on your campaign?
Well, I think it's had an impact on the city, and that question is important to be answered. Because let me point something out to you. The media has not covered it, but I thought it was important because Councilmember Moreno, we know she has a background in broadcasting and she reports on a lot of things, but she hasn't spoken on this. And I think if you want to be the leader of the city, you have to be able to speak to something like this because I think it represents a deeper issue we have in the city of New Orleans, where someone of that level of influence who has contributed that much to political campaigns can send an email to donors to try to stoke division in our community. That's wrong, and it needs to be called out. So if you want to lead this city, you need to be speaking about that, and that's one of her top donors, and she hasn't said a word about it. So the people need to know where she stands on that, so it was important for me to call it out because the media has not.
There are a few things that you have voiced your opinion on or have said as a part of various debates and forums that are different from what your opponents have said. One of those being a city-operated fortified roof program.
Yes.
The other being, you're the only one who said yes to a pedestrian mall on Bourbon Street. Can you, we'll start with Bourbon Street. Can you talk a little bit about why you believe it should be a pedestrian mall?
Thanks for giving me an opportunity to elaborate on what was just a yes or no question.
I know, those are hard, those are hard.
This is the forum for it.
Yeah, so let me add some nuance to that. The matter is being evaluated. So I'm gonna work with the businesses, I'm gonna work with the residents, but the fact that it's being studied and evaluated means that we have to give it consideration. But if we ultimately get to a point where the businesses say we need that to be able to get deliveries through, or the residents say they want it to be able to get to their homes, ultimately that's where I'm going to defer. But by me saying that I'm open to making it a pedestrian mall just means that I'm open to doing it. It's not an automatic no, but we have to continue to go through the process. And I don't believe that the city's fully examined it yet.
And something else I want you to explain or expand on a little bit is when you talked about removing yourself from the Sewage and Water Board, the board there, being the president, that's a position that holds a lot of power in the city. Why is it so important for you to not be a part of that?
Yeah, well, it's not about power for me. It's not about power. And I think by making that statement, we are sending the message to all stakeholders, locally and at the state, that we're focused on outcomes. We're focused on performance. We have experts, we have engineers, people who are working at Sewage and Water Board, who we expect to get the job done for the people of New Orleans. So the mayor has enough responsibility. So the mayor would have the responsibility to be able to appoint board members. But when you think about the real function and purpose of the mayor serving on the Sewage and Water Board, does that make it more political? I think that answer is likely yes. Now, we've examined this in the past, and not all may agree with what I'm proposing, but what I am saying is that I'm willing to give up power for the purpose of performance and outcomes for our people, and that's what we need to be focused on, and that's the bottom line.
We have 1 minute left, so I do want to give you the opportunity to touch on the fortified roof program because it is unique, and I don't think we've heard that from other candidates.
Yeah, so I currently serve on the Senate Insurance Committee. For the past 2 to 3 years, we've been working to refine our fortified roof program, which was modeled after the state of Alabama. The goal is people can take advantage of grants to get storm weather resistant roofs so that when a storm happens, you can mitigate loss. The idea is that it'll bring down insurance costs for all residents. Right now, the state grants are $10,000. What I want to do is create a local program that supplements the costs, because not everybody can afford the difference. Sometimes the cost is $15,000 to $20,000. We want to supplement that. My goal is to get 25% of rooftops in Orleans Parish fortified to help bring down the cost for everybody.
All right, Senator Duplessis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And as we prepare for Councilperson Oliver Thomas to join us in our post-mayoral debate special, we do want to hear from WWL Louisiana political analyst Clancy Dubose. Clancy, do you want to give us your thoughts in general just about everything you heard tonight?
Because there was a lot of points being made.
Yeah,
there's a lot of ground to cover. I would say that everybody was pretty much on their game tonight, and that's no surprise because they've had a lot of debates. I actually thought Senator Duplessis, this was probably one of the best performances he's given. Not that the others haven't been good, but I think he got more time, especially thanks to this post-debate interview where he got to go deeper into it. And I think the other candidates will do likewise. I expect to hear more about some of these questions from Oliver Thomas, who's up next, and from Helena Moreno when it's her turn. I really think it's interesting that Senator Duplessis said, he'd be willing to take himself as mayor off the Sewage and Water Board. I believe that would require legislation. He's a state senator. I would love to have been able to ask him, did he introduce a bill to that effect already? And if by chance he does not win the mayor's race, would he pursue that kind of legislation? I think that's a good question to follow up with him tomorrow, perhaps. And I think it's an idea that is worth discussing. And the idea of taking politics off the Sewage and Water Board by not having the mayor as a member of the board. Years ago, when I was a younger reporter, my hair was a different color, the mayor and 2 council members, I believe, were on the Sewage and Water Board. And over time, they decided to take the council members off the Sewage and Water Board. So maybe it is time to get the mayor off that board as well.
Clancy, I want to ask you, while we have you, during this debate, we didn't see a lot of personal attacks between the candidates.
Right.
There were some moments where they kind of talked to each other, maybe through a jab here and there, depending on certain things happening within city government or what have you. Your take on that?
Well, it was a very policy-oriented discussion, which is what everybody thinks that debates ought to be, and in fact, they should be that. And that's why I think all of them were on their game, because the questions that we all took 2 months to draft, right, and the questions that came from the voters themselves, pointing out problems that they had to deal with, I think framed this debate as well as any debate I've seen. And I've seen a lot of them over the last 53 years. It kept the candidates focused on policy and ideas rather than personal attacks. And I think that's always the best debate to have.
Clancy, when we spoke with you earlier this week, you had mentioned that debates like this really can change minds. We know there are still some undivided voters, or undecided rather, voters. Do you think that this debate did change any minds?
Well, that's up to the voters. It's hard for me to predict how this will play, but hopefully a lot of voters watched it, and anyone who hasn't made up his or her or their minds will be able to do so now, because there were enough distinctions. They generally agreed on what the problems were and what the direction of the city needs to be, things like, you know, addressing this dysfunctionality, which is the #1 issue. And it's rare for any issue to supersede crime as the #1 issue in New Orleans, but it's in keeping with the fact that, you know, citizens have a very low opinion of the sitting mayor. The last poll I saw, she was down to less than 20% approval and over 60% disapproval, which reflects voters' feelings that, you know, the city's just not functioning well right now. And you know, I think they're all focusing on that and less on crime, which reflects the fact that crime is down, as the statistics show, as all of the candidates pointed out in the question about the National Guard potentially coming to New Orleans. And, you know, I think it made for a very interesting debate. I took 6 pages of notes, and I've got writer's cramp. So
Only
I'm glad
6
to get
We
you
were
to
doing the
talk now
same
rather
thing.
than
We were
write.
doing the same thing. All right, thank you, Clancy. In studio with us now is current city councilman representing District E, Oliver Thomas, who has campaigned on making people the focus of his government.
Councilman, we certainly appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us. And we just want to know, how do you feel about tonight's debate?
Man, I feel great. And first of all, thank you guys and your viewing audience for the opportunity. Anytime you can share ideas and platforms for the city that you love with the people in this community who want it to be the best city that works for them, that's a golden opportunity.
You know, what does the first 100 days look like for an Oliver Thomas administration?
Well, it actually starts before the first 100. It starts during transition, where we gather the best team that can deliver municipal services, especially based on those charter mandated services. An Oliver Thomas administration wants to have people who not only understand their job, but understand the city, the culture, and understand the past. We have to begin to develop trust from the people in this city. And how do you develop trust? Make sure the trash is picked up on time. If they're paying for twice a week, at least make sure they get the 1 week. If you apply for a permit, if you have a good history of doing business with the city, why can't we issue a provisional permit so you can start your business? If the Sewage and Water Board sends you a bill, why shouldn't it be reflective of the bill you've had for 20 years, not the fact that somebody can't process a bill or understand the new billing system? Once we do that, we'll establish trust. And I don't want the plumber over the electrical department and the electrician running the plumbing department. I want skilled people who have some institutional knowledge or discipline in the area delivering our vital services.
To take you to a little bit of a personal note, you mentioned it in the debate when talking about culture and how important that is, that you're the only candidate who has actually participated in some Mardi Gras cruise. Can you talk a little bit about that and just what the culture of New Orleans has meant to you?
Well, first of all, thank you for that, because the social and pleasure clubs are not only an economic backbone of this city, but they're the essence of our community. Whenever I speak on our culture, whether it's around the country or in this community, New Orleans is one of the few places where we can feel our ancestors and souls every time we dance, every time we have those rituals, every time we beat on a street corner or on a drum. And to pay homage to them is part of my life. My family is involved in the culture. Treme did an entire episode, a couple of episodes, about how I fought to save the culture. The late Big Chief Chudy Montana died at a meeting that I coordinated, where I was the only elected official with members of Mardi Gras Indian tribes, talking about how do we educate the police and how do we educate new people to this city to understand and respect that it's not just black folk walking around in Indian costumes, it's paying homage to our Native American brothers and sisters who were part of giving refuge to us and part of our history. So, man, as a son of the culture and someone who's part of the culture, one of my fears is that it's diluted, or that too many people don't understand and respect it. Thank you for the question.
You know, as the councilman of District D, there's been a lot of talk about New Orleans East. Do you think it can ever rebound to what it was and what so many folks remember it as?
You know, you guys led the way in building on the assets of New Orleans East. So when you hear me talk about that, remember the show that the late Eric Paulson did and the series you guys did focusing on why New Orleans East mattered? All I did was build on that. So when you hear me talk about 7,000 acres of developable business park, railway and interstate access from Jacksonville to Santa Monica, two of the busiest waterways in North America, intercoastal and industrial, that feed the 33-state tributary system, America can't survive without it. Now, I'm hoping that post-Katrina, not just because of the demographic, that we've forgotten about New Orleans East and its assets, but one of the things I want to do is have a standalone economic development office. I want the titans in business and industry to be as proficient on the East and its assets as I am. First of all, what do we know? God isn't making any new land. Where is the land? The land is in parts of Gentilly, the Ninth Ward, Lower Ninth Ward, and New Orleans East. That's where we can grow. That's where we have to grow if New Orleans is ever going to have a diverse economy and if we're ever going to be whole. We can't keep saying we want to be whole with half.
All right. Thank you so much, Councilmember Thomas. We so appreciate you being here, appreciate your time. And we're going to head over to Clancy now as we prepare for Councilperson Helena Moreno to join us. Clancy, your thoughts?
Well, first, like Oliver, I am a child of New Orleans East. I spent the first 21 years of my life in New Orleans East in the Lower Nine. Lived in the East, went to school at Holy Cross in the Lower Nine. So I feel it when people talk about New Orleans East and what it used to be and what it can be and what it should be and what the city needs to do for New Orleans East. So I think it's great that we asked a question about it. And I think all of them had very thoughtful answers about that. But at the end of the day, the people who still live in the East want to feel, they want to see the mayor, the council, really focusing on the East. And I'm glad that they had a chance to dive deeper into that issue. You know, I thought Oliver did well. Again, it's a chance for him and everybody else who's been in this situation, in this campaign rather, to spend more time with us afterwards. And also, I'm glad that there's somebody in my generation, somebody, let's say, who's older than 49, running for mayor. I know we have Councilmember Moreno in the hot seat now, so I'm going to throw it back to you guys. But I thought all three candidates did very well tonight.
All right. Clancy, thank you so much. And joining us now is current City Council at-large member and Vice President Helena Moreno. Polls have shown that you have kept a pretty sizable lead during this campaign.
Councilwoman Moreno, of course, thanks for being with us and taking the time. With the debate now over, first, how do you really gauge your performance here and how it aligns with your campaign?
So I was obviously, glad and grateful that I was able to talk about some of the important issues and really be able to do it in a big way, being on the air live on your station, to be able to reach more people. As you know, we've been having so many different forums and debates. I think that my team counted, and I think we've done like 30 or 31 so far.
Wow.
And so you're trying to reach as many people as possible. So now that we're getting to the televised debates, it's just an opportunity for all of us to be able to reach more people.
Have your messages or have your ideas or plans for New Orleans been refined as you've done all of those forums and debates?
I'll say this, from the very beginning, I was always so much about really restoring our basic services. Because I'll tell you this, myself and other council members, we're the legislative branch. We don't run operations for the city. But one of the things that we certainly do see all the time is that operations for the city are broken. And there have been time and time again when I've been on the city council and I've proposed new ideas, and I've even passed legislation at times to improve our city services. But unfortunately, my ideas, even at times my legislation, have been ignored and pushed to the side. And that actually led to my decision to run for mayor of New Orleans, because now I would be the one responsible for implementing and getting things done for the city as the executive. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to be the city's next mayor, because while some people, while they see that we are a broken city, I actually see so many solutions to the problems that we have right now, and I see just so much opportunity. And I am so excited to just get rid of what has been and move forward to a great New Orleans that we will be.
You know, you came to New Orleans as a journalist. What,
Sure.
what we do, you can relate. You know, did you ever see yourself in politics, especially going to running for mayor of a city?
No, never. You know, the only thing I ever wanted to be was a news reporter and a news anchor ever since I was a kid. And if it wouldn't have been for Hurricane Katrina, I probably would have wanted to be another Sally Ann Roberts or Angela Hill. But Hurricane Katrina really changed my life as it changed many people's lives in our city. And that is when I really wanted to do more. And so I stepped up, ran for public office. The first time I ran for a public office, I actually ran for United States Congress. I said, you know what, I'm going to go big or go home. Well, guess what? The first time I ran, the people of the 2nd Congressional District sent me home. But I always knew that I wanted to keep pushing at it. And I had great mentors like Senator Mary Landrieu, Senator Diana Bajwa, who said, keep going at it. And so then I ran for the state legislature, was elected there 3 times, and then ran for the New Orleans City Council. But really, I mean, to your point, this was never, you know, part of what I thought I would be doing. But now that I look back and really reflect back on it, it's kind of like every step that I've taken in my adult life has really prepared me to be right at this moment, really prepared and with the experience to on day one take the mayor's office and start moving us in a new direction. From obviously my time in media, knowing so much about how to communicate with people, the importance of accountability and transparency, then being a state legislator, really understanding the dynamics of what it takes to get things done in Baton Rouge to deliver for the people of the city. And then on the city council, just understanding the issues so clearly right now, what is broken in our city, so that on day one, I can start fixing those issues. Within my first 100 days, you will see a whole new reset at City Hall. You will start feeling a whole new vibe around our city, because I will be working with just a level of urgency that you've not seen, at least in this city for the past several years.
I mean, being at City Hall every day and having such a close look at the way things work or don't work, you also, I imagine, have a close look at the hurdles. So
Yes.
how difficult do you anticipate it could be to overcome some of the hurdles that people have not been able to overcome before?
Devin, let me be very clear. This is going to be very hard, but I've never been afraid of taking on really hard issues. That's what it's going to take to turn this city around. I've never said that it was going to be easy. I don't believe that it's going to be easy. I said this actually during my closing, that to be a good mayor, you actually have to be a 24/7 mayor. It is a sacrifice to be in this job, but I take this job so incredibly seriously because it is my responsibility now to take care of the people of New Orleans when I become mayor, and they will become my #1 priority.
You know, on that topic, you say 24/7 mayor. It doesn't mean you're always going to be in the city. You're going to take a vacation. You're going to be gone. Let's say something happens. How do you still be a 24/7 mayor when you're maybe not in the state?
Yeah. What I mean by being a 24/7 mayor is that you can't check in and check out. You have to always prioritize the people of the city. That doesn't mean, of course, that I can't go visit my nieces, you know, in Houston for a couple of days, you know? I mean, it means that there is always that responsible, steady hand moving the city forward. And that is what you will always have with me, along with my leadership team. Enough with just, you know, absent leadership and those who are just yes people around the executive. That is not who I want around me. I want the very best and brightest around me. I want to ensure that all of the department heads that I bring on board are true experts in the different departments that they will be running. And that is what it's going to take to make sure that we finally have a city that works for all of us.
All right. Whenever you talk about priorities, first 100 days, we touched on so many subjects,
Sure.
and everything feels like a priority. How do you decide what is the priority on day one?
You know, Devin, that is a really great question, because what I will do when I get in office is I'm going to manage expectations. Obviously, I have to get into office and really focus in on our city services, making sure that our broken departments, that they are revamped and reestablished. So focusing in on the Department of Public Works, focusing in on the Department of Safety and Permits. And then from that point on, we'll build and build. Because you're right. I mean, everybody wants everything all at once. That's not going to be able to happen. That's why I have to be hyper-focused on city services, get that right, and build from there.
You know, Senator Duplessis asked you about the dysfunctionality in City Hall and how some people may see you as part of the chaos and part of the dysfunction. How do you set yourself apart from that when you talk to voters who may be undecided?
Well, let me be very clear. Senator Duplessis is saying that it's my sole fault for the supposed chaos and dysfunction. And honestly, I mean, he can barely deliver that line because I don't believe that he even believes that. I think we all know what the issue has been over the past several years as to why we have had dysfunction in our city. But I'm actually excited to be moving past that and moving forward to what a New Orleans that we all want. And look, ultimately, it has been the New Orleans City Council that has really tried to prevent additional chaos and dysfunction. And we've moved forward on a variety of different things that would have never happened without us. Obviously, the Wisner settlement, which is such a huge deal. That's because the City Council pushed forward and pushed back against the mayor and made sure that we were successful in Wisner. I talked about the school board settlement today. The people of Gordon Plaza would still be living in Gordon Plaza if it wasn't for the action of the New Orleans City Council. Once again, now we're pushing forward for the charity redevelopment, which the mayor is now battling the council again on the charity redevelopment. So there's so many different things where the council stepped in and, for lack of a better term, ensured that there wasn't chaos. And I even go back to remember when the mayor wanted to turn Municipal Auditorium into City Hall. It was my legislation that ended up stopping that because I required then council approval for any time that a city hall is going to be constructed, a new city hall, it must have council approval. So once again, just many examples of how it was actually the council who stepped up to try to prevent chaos.
All right, Councilwoman Moreno, thank you for being part of our post-debate
Thank you all
session,
so much
being
for
with us.
having us. Appreciate it.
As we prepare for our community stakeholders to join us in the studio, we first want to check back in with Clancy for thoughts here on Helena Moreno.
Yeah, I was really pleased to hear Councilmember Moreno talk about managing expectations. I think I might have been one of those who reminded her that it was Mitch Landrieu who first talked about that when he was in his transition period from winning the election to getting in. And he said that's going to be the toughest part of the job. And she's right. Managing expectations is one of the toughest parts of any mayor's job, whether it's the mayor of New Orleans or mayor of Washington, D.C. or L.A. or New York or anywhere else, or even a small town, because all cities have limited resources and virtually unlimited needs and problems. So I think, again, she did very well during the debate, and she did well like the others did after the debate. I'm glad that we're giving them a chance to go deeper into some of the things that define who they are and what they're all about. You know, it's the dysfunctionality that I mentioned before. I agree with Councilmember Moreno that it is not the council's fault that there's chaos. The chaos is coming from the fourth floor, which is where, I'm sorry, across the hall, fourth floor is in the state capitol, that's where the governor is. But down the hall at City Hall on the second floor, that's where the chaos is coming from. And everybody who's running for mayor is promising to end the dysfunction. And that's really a reflection of what's defining the second term of Mayor LaToya Cantrell. I'm going to throw it back to you guys now so we can listen to some of our stakeholders.
All right, Clancy, thank you so much. And Clancy, if you have a question for any of our stakeholders, we'll look over just.
We have a chime and a ding somewhere.
Yeah, we need you to give you a bell or something so you can ask a question from them as well.
Sure.
So we do have some community stakeholders here tonight that watch the debate right here at our studios, and you're going to hear a total of 5 people who work with different groups, focus on things like housing and youth services.
Yeah, these folks are really entrenched in our communities and kind of know some of the nuanced needs out and about. So we do start with someone from our debate partners. That is Nellie Katzen with the Committee for a Better New Orleans. Of course, thank you for your partnership in kind of crafting this debate. Now that it's over and we've heard from the candidates, you know, individually, what are your thoughts here?
Well, you know, tonight was really about giving residents the opportunity to hear directly from the people who are seeking their vote. And at CBNO, we believe that there's no better way, really, to vet a candidate than to hear directly from them how they stand on the issues that impact their lives, that voters most care about. And so it was really great to have the opportunity to hear these candidates speak side by side and to broadcast that to such a wide audience of New Orleans residents and voters. You know, if you're not a voter yet and you're a resident, you can still register to vote online by the 20th. And so I really thought it was a fantastic opportunity. New Orleanians are a great judge of character, right?
You bring up a good point there. It's not just about the voters. Young people can still listen to these debates and take away something because it's still their community, even though they may not be able to vote for mayor.
Absolutely. And a lot of people who we consider young people still can, right? If you're over 18, you can still have a say. You can talk to your relatives. If you're not over 18, you can talk to your relatives who can vote about the issues that you care about. So it was exciting to see young people and their futures featured so much in tonight's debate.
I do think it's interesting because everybody has the same goal, right? To make New Orleans a better, safer, greater place to live. It's really just about the roadmap to get there, and we did get to see that kind of side by side tonight. What was your big takeaway, I would say, from maybe the differences or maybe even the similarities between the candidates?
Nobody runs for mayor because of any reason other than that they want the city to be great and they want to lead. And I think we saw that in the candidates tonight. I was especially interested in hearing how candidates responded to the questions that were driven directly by residents. It's been so great to work with the team over the last several weeks preparing for this debate to identify what those issues are and to find real people within the community for the candidates to respond to. And I thought that they demonstrated listening, and I'll be interested to see how this shapes out in policy and really what residents and voters think in October.
Do you think there are still some issues or areas that these candidates still need to drive home or really dive into that maybe people feel like they're not addressing?
One of CBNO's top issues that we work on in trying to make sure that the city is great and that leaders have what they need to thrive is transparency and accountability. This is something that we don't get to see a lot of from City Hall. Certainly there are opportunities for greater awareness as well as greater access to information coming out of City Hall and access into City Hall from residents. That's something we always really want to hear from leadership about, especially as it relates to the city's budget. You know, the city has between $1.5 to $1.8 billion a year to spend on what residents need. And having access to not just the information about where that money is going, but also access to the conversation about where folks want it to go, and clear information is really a priority. I think a number of our questions this evening centered around how are you going to fund a solution to this issue or that issue. I'd have liked to see, and I will continue to seek, additional information from candidates about where the money is actually going to go. Because as we know, if it's not in the budget, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't exist.
So we really want to see the numbers match the priorities.
When we talk about priorities from citizens, we've had a number of polls, and most of them say crime and public safety is one of the top things. Infrastructure, also a really big one, and jobs and careers, which is pretty much, that's a big chunk of major issues. What kind of things do you hear in your organization from residents about what they're concerned about?
We hear those things certainly, and we hear that it's the rising cost of living is really the main priority for a lot of folks. Now, there's so much tied to that. There's the cost of housing, there's the cost of insurance, there's the cost of groceries, there's the ability for people to pay their bills because of the amount of money that they're able to bring in as a family. And so I think that one of the things that we're seeing a lot of concern for in this election is how will our next leaders prioritize making sure that people can thrive here, that we are putting safeguards on to the cost of living and to the extent that they can, and attracting better paying jobs, helping resolve the crises of the shortage of affordable units and the issues that are making housing more expensive. We're hearing a lot about that. And then, of course, the issues that were discussed at the debate tonight, issues facing culture bearers, investment in our young people, streets and flooding, of course, always a concern, and then maintaining the level of public safety and improving on the public safety that we've achieved over the last recent stretch here. are definitely on people's minds.
You know, a lot of times when candidates talk about these priorities and shaping them, it's all part of their first 100 days, or on day 1, I'm going to do this, day 2, I'm going to do this. Do you think those priorities that people relate to that folks are going to actually see some substantial change in those 100 days? Is this going to be done with these candidates, or are you hopeful that this can be done?
I maintain optimism in everything.
That's fair. That's fair.
A good way to be.
And I think a lot of these problems are systemic and are going to require systemic solutions. Mm-hmm. I believe that some progress can be made in 100 days, absolutely, especially if these candidates are able to uphold their promises of making stuff work in City Hall, which is a big barrier to anything getting done. I think a lot can happen in what's a third of a year, 100 days, roughly. They're not going to solve every problem that there is in New Orleans. If it only took 100 days, we would have no problems left. And a lot can be done in a short amount of time with good management, good systems, and good people working on the solutions.
We all know government can move slowly, yes. Depending on what those priorities are.
Sure.
I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up, and then give Clancy a chance as well to ask a question if he would like to. If we are sitting here again in 4 years, what kind of New Orleans do you want to be living in? What kind of New Orleans will we be talking about, hopefully, in 4 years?
Well, it'll all be better.
That sounds excellent.
No, well, I say all the time, we're not the committee for a perfect New Orleans.
Okay.
We're a committee for a better New Orleans. I will not be sitting here in 4 years and say, we're done, we got it,
Yeah.
everything's done, because this is iterative. We are always able to do better than we are now every single day. And so I'm hoping in the next 4 years that we find some real progress on these issues that are causing our population decline. Mm. Access to affordable housing, access to good paying jobs, investment in our young people and into the social services that make our community thrive. I'm hoping that we have made some significant strides on those things, on issues concerning climate and the impacts of the changing climate, and that we all have clear and accessible information available to not just leaders within City Hall, but everybody outside City Hall. Mm-hmm. We're seeking partnerships, we're seeking community engagement, and we're seeking transparency and accountability to make our city function and thrive.
All right, appreciate you being with us. Clancy, we'll go over to Clancy. Do you have any questions or anything you want to weigh in on?
Well, I was very glad that she pointed out the need to talk more about transparency and accountability, because that's one of a big problem that we have at City Hall right now, not just for us in the media, but as she pointed out, you know, average citizens and neighborhood organizations, they depend on accountability and transparency to keep up with the issues that are going on at City Hall and how they affect their neighborhoods and their businesses. And transparency and accountability has really been one of those areas where we backslid in the last 8 years because of the current administration just almost routinely, if not out and out denying public records requests, but stonewalling them. And the state law requires an answer on public records requests of 72 hours. You know, you got to get back and let people know that, yes, we have this record and here it is, or you can come look at it. And that's not happening right now. And I think all the candidates need to be held to account on that. And not that they violated it, but to make them commit to honoring the law, the spirit as well as the letter of the law going forward. Because if we don't have that, it's going to be very difficult for citizens to hold public officials accountable.
You know, and to bring Nellie back in on this, you know, doing public records requests or having this transparency as a journalist is one thing. Having it as a community member or an activist or an advocate of some degree may read something totally different. From your perspective, Nellie, why is this transparency so important?
Government thrives when people have access to the information they need, right? Democracy is founded on an idea that everybody has a role to play in the systems that we build locally, that we create in order to keep everyone in community with one another, thriving. And if you can't see what's going on, it can feel like someone's hiding something.
Democracy dies in the dark.
Democracy dies in the dark.
Yes.
Well
That's
put.
the problem.
I believe it was a journalist who said that. But it's important not just for the news media, who of course, helps us all access the information. But for the average resident to be able to see that our government is showing up for us, is listening to us, because really that's what democracy is about.
All right. Nellie, appreciate your
thank
insight.
you so much.
All right, Clancy, any other final thoughts here?
I do have a question for you, Clancy, about and this is something that you can answer while we switch in between our stakeholders here. My question for you is, we heard so many different responses or ideas when it comes to economic development from all three candidates. They all had very distinct industries that they thought would be good to invest in. I have them here. I think I can, I know that Oliver Thomas said tourism and biotourism. Senator Duplessis said expansion in the terminals and Charity Hospital and bioengineering. And also Councilwoman Moreno said small businesses, entrepreneurs, and mom and pop stores and businesses, for lack of a better term. So why do you think that is, that there are such different answers to that question? And is there a right answer?
Well, first of all, I was a small business owner with my wife for almost 30 years when we owned Gambit. And I can tell you that small businesses are the backbone of any community. But the truth is, there is no wrong answer, at least none that we heard tonight. The reason we heard so many divergent or diverse answers to that question is because all of those answers are correct. We need to harness more from the port. New Orleans exists here because of the Mississippi River. Without that river, we'd be, we might not be here. There would be no New Orleans. New Orleans East, as Oliver Thomas said, you can't talk about growing the city unless you grow the other half. The truth is, the 9th Ward is 2/3 of the land mass of the city. So more than half the city is east of the Industrial Canal in terms of land mass. Small business, we talked about that. Biomed, several of them mentioned that. All of these things are important. Tourism, of course. You can't. There's nothing you can do wrong in that arena as long as it's done in a way that encourages growth and investment. And yes, we have to encourage young entrepreneurs as well. I remember my dad telling me when I was a teenager, I think everybody ought to be in business. It's because he was a businessman. His father was a businessman. It's kind of in my DNA. So, entrepreneurship is what built this country in terms of economically. And, we have to harness that kind of spirit here in New Orleans. And I was particularly impressed with Councilmember Moreno's mention that, I think she said the city of Austin has several dozen people working in their Department of Economic Development, whereas New Orleans has 5 or 6 people. And yeah, we do need to pump up the Department of Economic Development if we're going to really jumpstart economic development in New Orleans.
Of course, will be part of the next conversation we have with some other stakeholders who are now joining us in studio.
Yes, we have Andronika Morris with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance and Deshae Greeley from New Orleans East Matters. And thank you both so much for being here. We heard a lot about both subjects that you all are passionate about. I do want to start with you, Andronika. We talked specifically about housing tonight,
yes,
and how much is needed and how to get there. Can you talk just from your perspective about what is reasonably achievable in the next few years?
So I want to thank you guys for having that question and circling back around to it twice. It is reasonably achievable. We've got 40,000 vacant homes right now. 10,000 of them are occupiable tonight. Could be home to some of the 28,000 people who've been pushed out, or the 1,000 of homeless children we have in this city, or folks who are in our shelters and on the streets of New Orleans. So this is all very possible. The needs that we have can be met. A lot of the problems that we have are rooted in this insurance crisis. We have people getting pushed out because it's too expensive for people to operate homes as businesses to rent to people at any level. And it's too expensive for people to stay in their homes. We've seen that most of the people who've been pushed out are people making less than making $12 an hour. That should be good money in a place like New Orleans. Mm-hmm. It's just we have this mismatch, but we have the units, we have the built units, and we do need to build more because we're still down over 100,000, mostly African Americans who still have not come home after Katrina.
When you heard the candidates tonight, did anything stick out to you, or did you latch onto something that says, hey, I agree, and can actually be done? Were you hopeful with anything?
I mean, yes, we heard that people are talking about the numbers, talking about what is possible, looking back at our history and saying we've done this before, we need to continue to do it, and we need the resources to do that. We also heard folks talk about the trust fund, that those dollars are going to get deployed next year. The people of New Orleans overwhelmingly, 75% of New Orleanians last year said take some of our money and invest in us. That we need to make sure this election cycle honors that commitment. There's also going to be some key votes later on this year to make sure that that commitment isn't undermined.
I saw you nodding your head. Can you elaborate? What about that did you agree with?
I would agree with what she's saying, because we're hearing about the trust fund as well with Lincoln Beach right now, and trying to utilize some of that money that they can give back to these projects that can flourish and thrive. So with what we've given, much we want to take back because we need it.
How many of the issues that we spoke about tonight or asked about are all intertwined? They drive right back. Oh my gosh, the reaction immediately. You're like, yes, okay. So I mean, it's the incomes and the population loss and the housing and the economic situation.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Being New Orleans East, although I'm with New Orleans East Matters, but as a resident of New Orleans East, before I was New Orleans East Matters, it was always about our tax base, our revenue, job revenue, having economic conditions. We was talking about NORD, and I was remembering how my children, 4-year-old, and they aged out of NORD, and how those programs are still needed. And when we talk about economic conditions, how we're having to have to go outside of New Orleans East, when we have the land, the rail, the air, and everything, we almost like an afterthought in New Orleans. And what we want to be inclusive, we having to spend your money in a Jefferson Parish, in a St. Bernard, in St. Tammany. Why? Because we need to have what we go out to buy in New Orleans East.
You know, in New Orleans East in particular, there's been a lot of talk about that district and that area in this campaign. You had each candidate tonight talking about their specific plans. Helena Moreno wants to set up an economic development office with a group specifically focused to New Orleans East. You had Thomas talking about all the changes that he's already made and some of the things that he's kind of led there. Duplessis talking about having a different conversation when it comes to New Orleans East and its image problem. I feel like all three of those need to be coupled together, which I'm sure you would agree with. But what of those three, if you could say, is kind of the one you lean to or the one you think is more feasible?
I'm going to say I heard Nellie earlier speak about we already working on it. We already have a plan. There shouldn't be no more tests, no more surveys, no more meetings, no more anything. We need to sit down at the table. I liken to what they said about the Super Bowl. They brought everybody in the room. Everybody needs to be in the room. Anybody who has to make a decision, who has to think about the funding, who has to attract the businesses, everybody needs to be in the room. And so when I think about all the things that the candidate says, all of those things need to be done. All of them. If we can culminate all of those into one, then I know New Orleans East can thrive and move forward.
And do you have some thoughts on that as a housing advocate?
So of course we say put housing first because that's the foundation of a city, of a community. We live together. And so we need to be able to ensure that everyone has safe, decent housing that they can afford and that they can count on. And that how do you get to that is the jigsaw puzzle that you all were just talking about. It's not just a box. It's also opportunity. It's also thoughtfulness and programs. And it's not just enough that you have a place to sleep, is that you have access to opportunities. You can actually get on a bus and get to the park. Right. You can get to school. You can get to work, whatever it is. And if you just don't want to leave your house and you don't have to.
And that's sharing in the entire New Orleans. Yes. We always think that we have housing. We have our share of it. And yeah, we can spruce up what we have already, because that's the thing. We have so many blighted areas and apartments and things of that nature. Let's fix those. We don't need to add more. Just fix those that are there now.
Right. And we can talk about bringing people home. A lot of those people have been pushed out of those homes. That's why they're empty and vacant.
Well, thank you both so much. I know you both do such important work. Such thoughtful answers tonight. Thank you both. We certainly appreciate it. And we're going to hear more from some community stakeholders as our post-mayoral debate special continues.
You know, Clancy, when you talk about New Orleans East, you talk about affordable housing. These are really big talking points for candidates. But for folks like these ladies, they're more than just talking points. It's part of their daily lives.
No, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the East. This is the stuff that hits home. And as Ms. Greeley was talking, and she talked about everybody needs to be in that room, I was reminded of that wonderful song from Hamilton, The Room Where It Happens. And it's what happened with the Super Bowl. We got everybody in the room where it happens, where the decisions are made, and everybody got on the same page. And I think it's telling that her point that, you know, we don't need any more studies, we don't need any more meetings. We already have the plan. Let's implement it and get everybody at the table in the room where it happens and make the commitment and put the resources behind the plan to implement it, because between that and managing expectations, as was said earlier, those are the tough challenges for the next mayor.
Candidates had three distinctive kind of takes on New Orleans East in particular. I want to ask you too, your thoughts on their takes on how to redevelop and spur some economic development there.
Well, it's like the general question on economic development. None of those answers were wrong. They're all part of a bigger puzzle. I think you need to do all of those things. It's an all of the above. There is no silver bullet for economic development. There is no silver bullet for fixing the challenges and addressing, I should say, not fixing, but addressing the challenges that face New Orleans East. The people out there know the problem. They're looking for the answers. They're looking for the same thing everybody else in New Orleans is looking for. They're looking for attention. They're looking for resources. They want their streets to be smooth and safe. They want streets to be well lit. They want playgrounds. They have good lighting and good programs for kids, not just little bitty kids, but like when I was a kid, I got to play Nord football, baseball, and basketball until I was 16 years old. That's what got me and many others in my generation, black and white, on a good path in life, because we learned about teamwork. We met friends that we otherwise might not have had because they came out, tried out for the team, and made the team. And we learned how to get along. We learned how to compete. We learned how to lose. You know, those are all important life lessons. And we had great mentors and our coaches who were all volunteers. And we need to get that kind of spirit back in Nord. And that's just one piece of the puzzle for making New Orleans the kind of city that we all want it to be.
All right, thank you, Clancy. Now for more reactions from another pair of audience members. We're checking in with two ladies who are working to help young people who, of course, will be our future leaders.
Yeah, we can't talk about the future of New Orleans without talking about young people. We welcome Maggie Herman and Sierra Gaines from the Children and Youth Planning Board. Thank you both so much for being here. We heard you ask your question during the debate, or set up the question for us, and you talked about Nord, and I want to ask you how, just to elaborate a little bit more on how important Nord is to youth in New Orleans.
Nord, along with any place in New Orleans, should come as a safe space for young people. It should be somewhere where they know in their community they can get to, whether that's right after school or it's been a long day before the morning starts. It should be somewhere that they feel that they can go with the right amenities. It's safe for them to go to. Their parents can know that they could go there and be safe and come back home. So Nord, to me, is just a safe space. It's a safe haven, and it's funded by it should be funded by the city. So it should be somewhere they should always be able to count on.
When you talk about this 10-year plan for the youth, 5 years into it, have you seen substantial change?
Substantial by definition, yes. We've seen a few things be implemented that has been great for the young people, just like the Opportunity Pass, which employs young people to get on the bus for free for a certain amount of time throughout the year. And that is free to them to get to and from work, to them to use for 24 hours throughout the day, and it always re-up, and it always replenishes. So I've seen changes like that. I've seen young people find their voice, because one part of our youth master plan is youth voice. So we've seen more youth leaders come up, and more young people feel empowered to advocate for themselves. So I've seen those type of changes, but with the lack of funding that we have been unable to implement big changes that not only will young people see, but they'll feel and they'll empower them more.
We saw all three of our candidates, we asked them about the commitment to investing in youth, and they all had different answers. Councilman Thomas said after school programs and tutoring programs. Royce Duplessis said he wanted a 0 to 3 universal pre-K, and Helena Moreno said the Big Green Easy Plan and crisis teams to enforce truancy. Can you talk a little bit about which of those align with the plan, or which of them do you think could have success in New Orleans?
I think an important thing to remember with the plan is that it's about investing in our young people from birth to 24. And so if we're investing in early care and education, we have to, yes, invest there. And then when young people inevitably become older than 5, we have to invest in out-of-school time programming for them, so they have safe places to go, like Sierra said. We also have to invest in workforce development and job training programs. And then also young people don't live single issue lives. And so when we have programs for young people, and especially programs that are staffed by caring adults who really know how to work with young people, who really care about their voice and their way that they want their programs to be, it's really important that they have funding from all kinds of angles. So some of the things they named are in alignment with the plan, like out-of-school time programming, like early care and education, and then also preventative services and making sure that we're investing in restorative approaches and not preventative or not punitive approaches.
You know, generations change all the time. When it comes to youth in particular, do you think they're being brought to the table as much as they should be these days?
I'm going to let Sierra answer that question as a young person and a young person who works with a lot of other young people raising their voice.
I feel that based off of what, I have 3 generations that are currently living in New Orleans, in Orleans Parish. So telling them about the work that I do and the wonderful things that they say about me, and they love talking about me to everybody in the community, I feel that young people have been brought to the table in a way that we haven't seen in past generations. And we're not only are we being brought to the table, we're making the table. Like, we're saying, okay, we could be in a room with y'all and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we're also have this table ready for us on the side because we know we are the future. So we're being brought to the table. We're also crafting our own table on the side because we know that this is a intergenerational change that we're doing, and it just looks a little different than things that have happened in the past. So we're being brought in. It is different. We are there, and it's a bit better than what I've seen from and heard from past generations.
The youth of our city is the future of our city. Ladies, thank you so much for the work you do and for being with us on this post-mayoral debate. And of course, thank you all as well for joining us. And we hope to see you right back on Channel 4 on election night.
Certainly. Our live coverage starts at 7. This is Saturday, October 11th. We've got expert analysis, and we will also have the first returns as soon as the polls close at 8.
And until then, be sure to stay with WWL Louisiana for all of the latest election updates. Have a great night.